Warren Allmand is Minister of Consumer and Corporate Affairs in the federal government. Mind you, he hasn't had the job that long. When did you get that job, Mr. Allmand?
A year ago, September. I've been in it for about 13 months, 14 months.
How does a chap like yourself cope with major switches, though? Solicitor General, then Indian Affairs, and then wham, you've got to be an expert in consumer and corporate affairs. Is it possible?
Well, luckily, I served on the Consumer Affairs Committee in the House of Commons for quite a while before I was a minister. That was the famous Basford-Kroll Committee back in the 60s. So I knew something about it, but it takes about a year to really get to know a portfolio. I mean, to get to know the people, to get to know the problems, get out into the field. After a year, you can take hold.
Well, let's get straight into the biggie. It's quite obvious, is it not, Mr. Allmand, that you must exert your pressure, your power, your influence, and your laws to prevent the Hudson Bay from taking over Sears.
Well, that is a very important proposed merger, and we have a director of investigation under the Combines Act, who is our man in charge of competition policy. He's looking at it. Of course, it hasn't really gone forward yet, but if that merger was to go through, Jack, the Hudson's Bay Sears Group, or Simpson's Sears Group, would have 43% of the department store market, which is a big chunk, and a lot of people are frightened about that. The small business people who supply Simpson's and who supply Sears and also who supply Hudson's Bay. Consumers groups are concerned. They're afraid that much control in the marketplace could lead to monopolistic practices.
Let me just stop there. You're saying that Hudson Bay would, if they took over the Sears and this stock purchase, control 43% of the retail...
The department store
retail business in this country.
That's right.
Well, you can control a company with 10%. They could control the country with 43% of the outlets, couldn't they?
Well, they'd have a lot of control. It would be a big chunk of the market, and that's why our director of investigation, Mr. Bertrand, is keeping a close look on this. I must point out that the director of investigation for Combines is like a super policeman for monopolistic practices and so on, and once he starts on a case, I can't control him, although he's in my department. I can't tell him to stop or to go ahead or to slow down because, you know, that would lead to some sort of political interference. He has an independent, when he wears the hat of director of investigation, he's independent.
He's a policeman, more or less, doing his own investigation.
Right.
But listen, I can't think of any effective track record in Canada. In the United States, the antitrust people are continually moving in and saying, break up this, break up that. We never do that, do we? We let big business go its own way.
I must tell you that our law on mergers is very weak, and that's why, starting with Mr. Bastard, we tried to reform that law. It continued under Mr. Ouellette. It's continuing under me. I had a bill before Parliament in this particular Parliament, which is still active, to revise our merger laws. The big example, the big failure recently was in the case of the K.C. Irving case, who bought every newspaper in New Brunswick.
Broadcasting stations.
Yeah, we were able to prove that that these mergers led to a monopolistic situation, but we couldn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they unduly affected lessened competition, and we lost the case.
So Irving walked away with his empire intact.
That's right.
Now, and again, you had the most unfortunate case of a colleague of yours who was, I think he was fined for contempt of court in the sugar combine. What was the final upshot of that one when he kind of intemperately made comments about a judge?
Well, it
was Ouellette, wasn't it?
Yes, Mr. Ouellette held the job that I have now, and at the court of first instance, when the judge ruled that the Crown did not prove its case against the sugar companies, Mr. Ouellette was critical of the judge and was found in contempt of court. It so happens that the Court of Appeal ruled against the sugar companies and brought down the biggest fine in Canadian history, over $2 million against those three sugar companies. But that's gone to the Supreme Court now, so I have to be careful.
You've got to be careful what you say.
That's right.
You mean to say that...
We're quite pleased, Jack.
What was the fine in the court against the sugar combines?
It was $750,000 for each company, and the total fine was over $2 million, which was a record fine in Canadian judicial history.
Now, but this bill that you've got in front of the present lame duck parliament, because you ain't going to pass it in the spring of next year, are you?
Well, the bill has to be reintroduced because we started a new session in September or October.
Oh, I see. Anyway, that bill, is it got any tough measures in it? You confess yourself that even since Basford days you've been trying to toughen the hand against big business, but you've failed.
Yeah, I want to make clear that our provisions against monopolistic practices and price fixing have been pretty successful, and in the sugar case.
In relation to sugar, yes.
Well, and there are several other. We've had a good record in monopolistic practices and price fixing, but the record in mergers,
antitrust, you might
yeah,
say,
has been very poor. The new bill would be a great improvement in the area of mergers. It would be a great help to smaller and middle-sized businesses who want to enter markets, who want to, it would prevent a lot of exclusionary practices, predatory pricing, that very often very big companies try to do to control a market.
But right now, though, supposing your director of investigation, Bertrand, comes back with a real tough report, right? Have you enough teeth in the present law to stop the merger of the Bay taking over Simpson Sears?
Well, after his investigation, he may lay a charge. He can do that either by going to the Attorney General to lay a charge or going to the Restrictive Trade Practices Commission, and it would depend on the evidence he had, Jack. But you need an awful lot of evidence under the present law, and it's the criminal burden of proof. You've got to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. In the United States, in those cases, you have the civil burden of proof, which means that you just need a preponderance of proof and not as much evidence.
Is that going to be in your new act? Preponderance?
That is in the new act.
But right at the moment, if I got...
That will be, that's in the bill.
That's in the bill. If you and I between us had $7 billion, right, and we wanted to buy out every department store in the country, would that be in itself, after an investigation, potentially a criminal act?
Oh, yes, it certainly would.
Or the very act of buying?
No, it would
Or is it the intent of the purchase?
You have to gain the control and use that control, or have the ability to use that control to control the market.
For predatory pricing and...
Yes, for all kinds of things.
A combine,
That's
bad
right.
combine.
Now, you're quite correct. The United States has much tougher laws in this area than we do. So does West Germany. So does the common market. And we think that Canada should bring itself up to date.
I have been making a quick study, clipping in the Globe and Mail, on the Centre for Study of Inflation and Production in Canada, which is very concerned about the obviously soaring prices and soaring profits in the food and beverage industry, up 35% compared to the previous year in the first 9 months of 1978. What have you done about it?
Well, we just got that report yesterday. That report was a report from what we call CSIP. By the way, that's the new group to monitor prices.
Centre for Study of Inflation and Productivity.
CSIP is the shortened form, but it's to replace the AIB in price monitoring. The AIB, as you know, phases out at the end of this year, in a month or so.
Is that just really a publicity thing to put kind of moral pressure on people?
Well, it has no rollback power, CSIP,
Right.
but it has the power of investigation, the power to monitor, and to issue these reports, and it puts a lot of pressure on companies. That report has put a lot of pressure on the food processors and the people in the food business. Well, I just got the report yesterday. The First Ministers just got it yesterday at the conference in Ottawa. The allegations are very serious, but there's one striking thing about it, is that there seems to be a difference between their findings and the findings of an AIB report published in June, which said that the profits were about 20%, and that they were reasonable in the context. Now, what I've got to do is sit down and put these two reports together. I've asked that be done already, and find out why one is different than the other.
Is it not a fact that the average Canadian is so, well, battle weary, you might say, that they just expect everything to go up and the value of the dollar and food prices to soar, and they've got the feeling that no government at any time will really do anything that helps?
Well, of course, in most cases, increased prices are due to increased costs and short supply. There are usually good reasons. Now, that's not to say that there can't be cases of profiteering, but in most instances, there aren't profiteering. The reason Canadians don't complain about these increasing prices is that whenever they pay a price, when one Canadian pays a price to another Canadian for a product or a service, that money's going back into the pockets of some other Canadians in increased revenue or increased dividends or whatever. And it's going around the circle. But nobody wants to be ripped off, or nobody wants to be, the subject of profiteering. And we've got to keep our eye on those things. And I'm going to look in. I promised in the House of Commons yesterday. Mr. Broadbent put the questions to me. I said it's a serious charge, and I'm going to follow it through, and I'm going to do that.
Wouldn't you rather be back in Indian Affairs or Solicitor General?
Well, both those portfolios had, I think, very big, important challenges, which really interested me. the constituency is more identified there. You know who the Indians are.
You know what you're doing, that's right.
You know the Indians in Canada. Everybody's a consumer. You're a consumer, I'm a consumer.
And we all hate you. And we'll hate you for all the time you're in the office. More with Warren Allmand. Mr. Allmand, you're a solicitor, right? A lawyer.
Yes, I am.
You are Solicitor General.
Yes, that's right.
You've been through the hoops on the Mountie bit and everything else.
Yes, that's still underway, as a matter of fact.
Have you yet appeared in front of the McDonald Commission?
No, and I want to appear soon because I want my side of the story to be known. But I did appear publicly before the McDonald Commission in Quebec for 2.5 hours of cross-examination and questioning.
When you appear in front of the McDonald Commission, can you take with you any documents you wish, or is there a cabinet, I forget that, executive exclusion order? Are you free to take what you wish to the McDonald Commission to present your case or any case?
Well, I've had no instructions on this yet. I intend to table many documents that will support my position that I never knew of any policy of illegality and that I never approved of any policy of illegality. There are letters, there are memos, and I intend to try and table those, and I've had no word to the contrary, so...
Well, you're kind of lucky. The whole McDonald Commission seems to have died in the public eye, doesn't it?
Well, it was pretty lively a week or so ago with former Commissioner Higgett there, and...
oh, yeah, it's the Higgett bit. Were you involved in the Higgett caper? The contradictions there?
Yes, because he, before the Cable Commission, said that he did not tell me things, and then in the McDonald Commission said he did tell me things, and there seemed to be some contradiction in his evidence, and that was brought out in the cross-examination. But then Mr. Starnes, who was the director of the security service for a very short while I was minister, he was testifying. But the last week they've been in camera. That's why it hasn't been in the news.
Well, you'll be in both public and in camera, I suspect.
Well, I would like the majority of my evidence, or the general rule, to be that I'll be in public, because I want the public to know my side of the story. I don't want it to be in camera. I can see going into camera if it's going to affect national security or it's going to hurt our arrangements with
Not
other
if it
countries.
embarrasses you?
No, I have nothing.
You can't be embarrassed on it?
I don't think I can. I think
Clean as a whistle?
I think so.
No. The reason I mentioned law is because I'm going to bring you to a very, very touchy question of British Columbia. And first I must give you a sentence of background. The Chief Justice of the Court of Appeal of British Columbia faced, and I'm being deadly accurate in this, scrupulously accurate in this, faced with certain allegations, took action himself in which he said, regardless of the substance, my usefulness as Chief Justice of the Court of Appeal is impaired, and I'm taking a leave of absence and will resign at the end of the year. We have been able to state with authority that these allegations involve a girl now charged in a body house. Many people in British Columbia, including Clark Davey, the publisher of the striking Vancouver Sun, and myself and others, are deeply concerned that the announced resignation will be accepted as sufficient and that there will be no public explanation of the entire circumstances, not only to clear or otherwise Mr. Farris, but to clear or otherwise the integrity and probity of the courts in British Columbia. With your solid experience as a lawyer and a cabinet minister, taking a case where a Chief Justice walks away from his job, what must the public be told? Forget the circumstances, but where a Chief Justice says, my usefulness has been impaired by certain allegations, true or not, regardless of substance, can we, the public, accept that as a finality of the shocking incident?
Yeah. Well, I must tell your audience, as I told you, I know very little about that case because it's received very little news coverage in the East. I think we had an initial story about the case, and that was all. And that was a little tiny back-page story.
We can forget the case, Mr. Allmand, and you can tell me as a seasoned cabinet minister how that should be properly handled for the public good, not for the public gossip, but for the public good.
Well, I understand our new Minister of Justice, Mr. Lalonde, will have some responsibility for it, and I don't know exactly.
He's got the Judicial Council report on his desk this morning.
That's what I heard you say earlier. Well, all I can say about it is that there is no doubt in my mind that we have to have a very high standard for our judges because they are making important decisions with respect to legality and illegality, and they have to be beyond reproach. And if there is some suspicion of criminality or
improper conduct is a better word.
Well, whatever improper conduct, I think that it has to be investigated. Now, I understand here that I don't know what investigation's going on, and I don't think I should say much more because I don't know very much about the case, and I don't want to. No. Yeah, I don't want to be accused of making a wrong judgment.
Forgetting that, though, but looking at the probity of the bench across the country. Surely it's essential, Mr. Allmand.
Well, I agree with that. The public has to have full confidence in its judges. There's no doubt. And you have to do whatever necessary to make sure that that confidence is there. Because if the public loses confidence in the judiciary, a very important part of your governmental process breaks down. So, that's a principle which is very important, that the public has to have full confidence in the judiciary, and the government and the people that are responsible must see to it.
One other small question. So you're telling me that whatever steps must be taken to restore the confidence of the public in the highest courts in the land must be taken?
That's right, and I don't know exactly what the situation is out here in BC, but as a general rule, I'd say that's true.
Fair enough. We'll leave you there. When you see Mr. Lalonde, perhaps you might express the concern of the public, which I believe to be a true concern, that the public the faith in the judicial system, especially in the highest court in British Columbia, must be restored at the earliest possible date. It is not presently there, that faith. However, that's my own private opinion, public opinion. You are the only... Now, if I say this, Mr. Allmand, you'll tell me I'm a racist. You are you're the only Anglo from Quebec in the cabinet.
That's right.
In fact, you're one of the few Anglos in the cabinet.
Oh, no. Two-thirds or more of our cabinet are English-speaking.
You can see what I was reaching for.
Yeah, well, that's not true. That's a story. I mean, there's Mr. Andrus and Mr. Gillespie, and there's Mr. Lang, and there's Mr. Jameson and McKechnie, and there's a lot of them. But I'm the only English-speaking Quebecer left in the cabinet. Mr. Mackesy quit to run in Quebec, and Mr. Drury retired. So I'm the only one left, and I've got an important constituency there. What a lot of people forget is, and I think sometimes they forget that out here, is that Montreal is still the third largest English-speaking city in Canada after Toronto and Vancouver.
Counting Bill 101?
It's still the third largest English-speaking city in Canada, and Quebec is the fourth largest English-speaking province in Canada. There are more Anglos in Quebec than in Manitoba.
You wouldn't know it, would you?
Well, we got some big institutions in Quebec. We've got McGill University, the Royal Victoria Hospital, the Gazette, the Star's on strike, but we've got a lot of radio and TV. We've got a big population there, and sometimes I have a feeling that we're written off by the English-speaking people in the rest of Canada who say, let Quebec go or let them all speak French there. And we're also forgotten by some of the French-speaking majority in Quebec. Mr. Levesque and his team.
But are you making enough noise?
Oh, I think.
Or don't you get a fair crack of the whip?
No, I think we're making enough noise. A very important judgment came down the other day, Jack, where 4 lawyers in Montreal, one a French Canadian, one an immigrant, and 2 English-speaking lawyers had taken an action against Bill 101. They defeated it. They found it was found unconstitutional in the court of first instance. And yesterday, or a few days ago, the Court of Appeal in Quebec confirmed that judgment of the trial court, that the provisions in Bill 101 outlawing English in the courts was illegal. And now Mr. Levesque's in the funny position where he's now appealing that judgment to the Supreme Court of Canada, which he's always treated with a bit of derision and saying, that it's a foreign court and so on. But he himself is taking his Quebec judgment, which he doesn't like, to the Supreme Court of Canada. But that's a victory for us people in Quebec who believe in the freedom of choice in language.
I've got to take an extra minute here. You're to be out to speak to the BC Federation of Agriculture at Richmond at 10 o'clock.
Right.
We'll have you there, not to worry. But what, therefore, if Levesque lost in the Supreme Court of Canada, what could he do?
Can't do anything. That means a part of his Bill 101 is illegal, has no effect. And there are 2 other important cases starting up, one against the provisions of his bill with respect to signs. Part of the bill says you have to put your signs in French and you can't put them in English. That's being challenged.
And the churches can now put the notices up in English, I see.
Well, a lot of people, Jack, I must tell you that the practice is, I know lots of people who haven't changed their signs. They're just saying, to hang with the law. And the other important sections that are being challenged are the ones on education. Now, it's true that even with Bill 101, the English-speaking people of Quebec who've lived in Quebec before, they can still have their English schools. And there are a lot of English schools in Quebec, but the people that are coming in as immigrants or from other provinces, they're the ones that are having a tough
But back to
time.
Levesque. If he loses in the Supreme Court of Canada, which might not be unlikely,
I think he will lose.
where does he stand then?
Well, he's
He
lost.
can't pass a new law on it.
No, he's lost
It
that.
becomes a propaganda thing for separation.
Oh, no, because it would have, Jack, if the federal government had referred the case immediately to the Supreme Court, and where the chief litigant, the chief plaintiff, was the federal government, and the only court was the Supreme Court of Canada with 6 of the 9 judges from outside of Quebec. We said, no, let it start in the Quebec courts, and it did. And so Levesque lost in the Superior Court with Chief Justice Duchesne, the Chief Justice of Quebec, known to be a nationalist, but even he ruled it illegal. Then you've got the Quebec Court of Appeal with the biggest bench sitting on that case that ever sat on any case before, saying it's illegal. So now if the Supreme Court confirms these 2 Quebec courts, Levesque can't say that this is something being imposed from outside.
And you regard this as a major victory?
Sure it is.
Off you go and encourage the farmers. My thanks to Warren Allmand, the Olmsted Solicitor General, Minister of Consumer and Corporate Affairs. Thanks very much, Mr. Allmand.
Thank you, Jack.
How long do they run? What's a nice sex therapist like you doing in a place like this? Keith, there's one cent. You might think I didn't get very far with Warren Allmand on the subject of the Faris affair, but it is essential that we question these Eastern cabinet ministers, national cabinet ministers, forgive me, on issues like this, because one invariably finds that even though they're members of the cabinet, at this stage they know nothing of the circumstances surrounding such a crucial event. And as a reporter, I always attempt to give them the straight-up version of what we know of what is happening. And we've done that. As I told you at the top of the show this morning, I learned yesterday that the Judicial Council report is on the desk of the Minister of Justice. He hadn't seen it at the time. I don't know when that report will be released. I don't know what it will say. Speculation is that it will say the resignation is enough, which is certainly not my opinion. That will have to be on the back burner for a little while. I watched Gardy Gardam, the Attorney General, with considerable, well, what shall I say, ironic interest, talking yesterday about this unhappy Benrod affair. From the very beginning, it's been perfectly obvious that no real action was going to be taken to restore the confidence in the operation efficiency and the probity of the provincial bench. And now we've got Gardy wandering all over the lot, talking about the need to give the Judicial Council a little more this and that, a little more power, a little more whatnot, provision to put judges on sick leave, whatnot and whatnot. The plan was that the unfortunate judge was going to be back at work tomorrow. Yesterday. But Alan Williams, thank goodness he was there that day, was the fellow who said, more or less, no way. Let's have another look at the transcript of the entire proceedings. Entire proceedings. However, I don't think I pointed out to you that the appointment of judges in British Columbia to the provincial bench has been traditionally done by the Attorney General, and including in it, both by the NDP and Social Credit, a fair amount of direct, the word isn't patronage, what is the word? That sympathizers or supporters of the party in power generally turn up as provincial court judges. Now we technically have a new system, and that new system is that the Judicial Council examines candidates for provincial judgeships, rules, measures them out, and recommends to the Cabinet for appointment. It's still much the same system as it was before. In fact, I understand that the situation now is that if you're a lawyer wanting a judgeship, that you write an application to the Judicial Council, and that they will consider, and perhaps accept or reject you as a potential candidate. Judges at all levels should be appointed only on the basis of selection by the best of their peers in the business. No one should be able to apply for a judgeship. Somebody somewhere should be saying, now there's a fellow who one day will make a good judge. There's a guy of total probity. There's a guy who does not have or never has had an alcohol problem or any other kind of social problem which is going to bring him into disrepute in the public eye. You shouldn't be taking applications from judges. I wouldn't mind applying for the job of Chief Judge of British Columbia myself, even though I'm not a lawyer. I certainly wouldn't have some of the problems that Mr. Goulet has now, I'll tell you. But don't make it too hot this morning, Webster. What we're going to do this morning, I'm expecting to hear from my man Coxgrove up in Trail or Nelson or wherever it is this morning, because our little program with Mr. McGee has certainly put the strikers among the pigeons. When I pushed old Patrick into bringing out his deep-seated desire to apply the Essential Services Act to get the janitors back to work. And I have threatened, when Brian phones me this morning, to tell the people which hotel he'll be in tomorrow, so that all those who want to be on BC television can line up outside Brian's door and say their piece live on this program tomorrow morning from the West Kootenays. However, in the meantime, I'm not very good at certain types of interviews, I'll tell you. I'm not very good at the sex bit. However, I was blackjacked by somebody or other into doing an interview with what I'm told is the best sex therapy couple in this country. They're not, one is better than another, or one is not as good as another, but sex therapists are sex therapists. And I've had their name, the name of this couple, stuffed down my throat by ranting, raving mothers from Surrey and Delta. So next up, in real life on videotape, will be the Chernicks, sex therapy. Oh my goodness gracious me. It's quite tasteful. There's nothing that will make you blush, I'm sure, or I wouldn't put it on. First came the Kinsey Report. Then came the Masters-Johnson studies. Then came the incredible public awareness, I suppose, of what was going wrong in marriages, or what we're told is going wrong in marriages, until finally almost everybody gets an incredible inferiority complex if they're not some kind of technical expert one way or another. So here I am with people whom I somewhat fear. And from what I know of them up to now, I'm not particularly sure that I like them. Because I suspect, we'll find out in a moment, that the Cherrills, that's Beryl and Noam Chernicks, the Chernicks, Beryl and Noam Chernick, are the people who put out a number of films which have been used in the schools in British Columbia with disastrous social results. Disastrous from the point of view that some parents go absolutely hairy when they know their children are watching them, and some people think they're the greatest educational devices since sliced bread. Noam Chernick, I've shown you my perhaps misconceptions or perhaps my accurate summation. Are you another of these husband and wife teams, you and Beryl, who have jumped on a bandwagon on a bit of an erotic kick, which you can pretend is the great savior of marriage in 1970-something, eh?
Perhaps I wish I was, but I'm not.
What are you?
I'm an obstetrician gynecologist who discovered during my training that there was a huge field of obstetrics and gynecologists that we couldn't touch with the usual methods, like surgery and medicine, and that another tool was needed to help us deal with these people who were really in tremendous pain.
Tremendous pain? You mean mental pain, physical pain? What are you talking about?
Both.
Mental pain. Let's go with the mental pain. But first of all, let me ask Beryl about these particular movies. Movies? Am I right?
There are movies and there are audio tapes and things like
Which
that.
you have demonstrated and which have they been widely used in British Columbia in the schools?
I think they have been used in some school systems, Jack. I couldn't say exactly.
Some school systems in British Columbia?
Yes.
And I'm talking about teenage education as well as perhaps adult education, am I not?
Definitely.
All right, generally speaking, what has been the worst? Give me your worst reactions that you have ever come from your progressive techniques. What do people call you? The Chernicks?
Well, they don't
If
say
they
it to
don't
our
like
face,
it-
so I don't know, Jack.
Oh, yes, you do. Come now. Do you know, Noam?
The worst thing the people have
People
said...
who resent your kind of modernistic approach to what is a real social problem. What do they
Sure.
think of you?
Let me just give you an example.
Right.
Yesterday we were told that as sex therapists we should be extinct. We are a terrible crowd. And I agreed with the lady who phoned. I thought that as a physician, my job is to make myself extinct. It's to do my job so well that I'm no longer needed.
Oh, that's a cop-out. You know perfectly well that's not the question I was asking you. I'll tell you the reaction I've had about the Chernicks when you've shown these kind of... You tell me the kind of thing you do together as a duo on audio tape and movies for the purpose of education.
Well, first we have to establish that we've got one major difference from the Masters and Johnson kind of approach, and it's the difference that has made us very welcome and very comfortable in places where people don't like technical sex, and that is that we strongly believe in marriage, and we strongly believe that communication and not just sex is the important thing in a good marriage. What we do with our role playing, if you want to call it that, is to try and demonstrate how to take difficult marital situations and convert them into good communicative situations.
In other words, you're behaving like a couple of intelligent adults.
Yes, sir.
Would you suggest to me that the average married couple in the matter of communication, be it about sex or anything else, are a little bit stupid?
Ineffective, anyway.
Ineffective. Give me an example of role-playing in a conflict situation in the family. Is that a fair thing to ask you to
Sure.
do? Right,
Sure.
turn it on.
All right, the guy walks in, and he's just discovered that his daughter's got some pills.
Mhm.
All right, birth control pills.
Mhm.
And rather than thinking, he comes in. What's going on? What are those things? What are those things there? What are you,
what
her
do they
mother?
look like?
Well, why don't you do something? How come you're
I
just
have done
standing
something,
there?
That's why she's got them.
What do you mean? What do you mean? You know she's got them?
Well, I'm the responsible parent here. You're never around.
Oh, don't give me any of that. You're responsible. But what happens when we go to bed at night? Where are you responsible? You got headaches. You got all kinds of things wrong with you.
Well, the way you treat me otherwise, why should I be
you know, you've got
different?
excuses. That is the kind of non-sexual behavior that leads to the kind of sexual dysfunction that we see all the time.
You're telling me that people have to be taught this?
People have to be taught to communicate on a feeling level so that they don't get into this kind of silly interaction.
I suppose so, but I'm back to my original premise, from which I don't want you to escape. And it may be that you'll convert me to your particular role. And that is that there are people with certain, what they regard as rigid, perhaps puritanical standards, who feel that any invasion of their child's privacy in the school from a lecture from which they instruct them to withdraw is both humiliating to their child and an invasion of their privacy. Now, that complaint has been made about the use of your role-playing movies and audio. Do you accept that as legitimate? Or must you have your techniques spread universally throughout the schools?
We've produced material that's useful as reference material by people doing various things. Whether they use them or not is at their discretion. Like, we don't have control over where they're used.
In other words, if you were a parent of, say, a particularly evangelical religious background, you wouldn't want your child to see or hear your material, would you? Put yourself in that place.
There are some people in that kind of group who don't, and there are others. For example, many in the marriage enrichment organizations in North America in general are from churches, including evangelical churches, who do use our materials.
Is it not, though, in all your approaches and techniques, what some people would regard as a built-in permissiveness for sex outside of marriage?
No, absolutely not. Just the opposite. The technique that we like to use, and the technique that we think pervades the movies that we've made, is a technique that involves responsibility within marriage, and specifically, which involves the passage of feelings between married people, making sex much better within the marriage.
Now, it says here, you have a new book out, In
Right.
Touch.
Right.
I think it's shady enough so that we can show it on television, on my television program, because I'm a professional square. Beryl and Noam, N-O-A-M. Where did you get that name?
That's a biblical name.
Noam.
Yes, sir.
You mean
It comes-
Noah?
No, Avinoam ben Barak.
Avinoam.
Avinoam ben Barak.
Was Deborah's general
Oh, who was Deborah?
in the Judges, Book of Judges?
Oh, I do apologize. I'm not very good on the Book of Judges. Beryl and Noam Chernick are a husband and wife team of doctors. You're a doctor too, Beryl?
Physician, yes.
Physician. Who have created an exciting new system that will improve any marriage and save many that are headed for the rocks. Carry on. You're talking to all the broken marriages watching my programs, or the near broken marriages. Save them from the rocks. You can't give them the money they need to make life easier. You can't solve their sickness problems or the built-in neuroses from which many people suffer, not necessarily connected with sexual dysfunction. What particular marriages do you think you can save?
That's quite right. We're certainly not saviors. What we can do is take any situation, as bad as it can be, and teach people that by at least exchanging their feelings, they can improve the situation. They can improve the situation as far as their feelings go.
So you're building up a mutual support system that helps them deal with the outside the home problem, the money pressure, the work pressures, all the other hassles. We can't change those, of course not.
Is what you're telling me that a satisfactory sexual relationship between a couple is a savior from other crises and a built-in comfort, you might say? Is that what you're trying to tell
No,
me?
we work at it from the other point of view. We work at it from the point of view of communications. A good communication pattern in marriage is a much better guarantee of reasonable sex than a bad communication pattern.
Yeah, but I hope you're not calling for total honesty between couples.
Now, as a matter of fact, that's a really interesting point.
That's why I raised it.
Yes, sir.
Because I know what total honesty can do to people on occasions.
Right.
It can destroy either one or both of the partners.
Absolutely.
Our contract, if you like, especially the contract that we have and the contract that we teach with our therapy couples, is a contract that goes like this. I will tell you what I feel, provided you listen to that and give me feedback. What I do not expect is to tell you everything that I think, and I don't expect you to tell me everything that you think.
What's the difference between feeling and thinking? Okay, give me a role playing between feeling and thinking. Switch it on.
Okay? It's breakfast time.
Breakfast
And
time.
I got up late. All right. Here's a role play with thinking. Is this a shirt that you put on? What is this? Is this tea or coffee? Hey?
Well, it was coffee when I
What do you
made
mean
it.
it was coffee?
Well, if you came down on time, it wouldn't be cold.
That's honesty. All right. And it's unnecessary, and it's unkind, and it's just ineffective. All right. Rather than that, I come downstairs and I say, I feel very uptight.
Tell me about it.
I'm late. Nothing seems to be going well, and if you could maybe please get me my car keys and help me get out of here.
So you're really feeling hassled.
Yeah.
I think your coffee's cold, too.
Yeah, I don't particularly like the drink, but that may be just because of what I'm feeling. So the drink hasn't changed, but at least I haven't cut her down and haven't cut myself down.
Well, that's the important thing, to say what you feel
It's not
yourself.
bad. It's not bad coffee, Jeff.
That's quite good coffee. To say what you feel yourself, but don't say what's really at the... Don't take your bad temper and your spite out on your partner.
Absolutely.
Now, do you have to write books about that to tell people?
I guess so. Judging from the dysfunction that we see in our office, and as we go around the country, the dysfunction we see, it's obvious you have to
All
write
right,
books on it.
dysfunction. Oh, you mean an imbalance in the marriage whereby they don't have any harmony at all sexually, right?
In sex or in communication, either,
And the communication is essential before you can have the other,
generally.
generally speaking. Well, what do you do apart from writing these books?
I deliver babies.
You still deliver
and
babies.
I do gynecological surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And we spend long hours working together in the office with couples who have come to us or been sent to us by their family doctor because they have either relationship problems and or sexual problems.
You, of course, I'm going to have you blacklisted. What you're really doing, of course, is moving into the field of psychiatry by the back door and robbing them of their traditional sphere of interest. Am I not somewhat close to the truth in that?
Well, I don't think so, Jack, because as Noam said, we got into this whole thing during our residency and our postgraduate training in medicine, particularly in the area of obstetrics and gynecology.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing we thought, of course, was, well, send this person to the psychiatrist, because obviously they have a problem. Surgery isn't going to fix it, and medicine isn't. Medications aren't going to fix it. Well, the psychiatrist sent them back at that stage of the game and said, we don't know anything about this.
Are you
So
telling
we
me
went
that...
looking for special training.
In other words, the average psychiatrist, trying to get you into trouble, can't cope with the sexual dysfunction in the marriage?
When we started 10 years ago, that was quite right. And their answer to that was that this patient is not psychotic or neurotic, and we don't deal with people who are well. So the people that we deal with come in that mid-category. They are not psychotic.
Mm-hmm.
They are not neurotic.
They may well become neurotic.
They may well become neurotic, but right now they are just having a difficult relationship. And from that difficult relationship, they've found that their sexual communication's broken down.
In other words, you really have established a new, on the basis of what you learned, I presume, from Masters and Johnson and Kinsey, am I right?
And from what we learned through our marriage counseling training.
You've learned a kind of new specialty in the field of medicine.
Yes,
Is that right?
Absolutely agree.
Is it covered by Medicare, MSA, and Blue Cross and all the rest of it?
Yes, it is.
Now, it is covered.
Yes.
Oh, I was going to ask you what you charge for counselling in your home base in London, Ontario, is it?
London, Ontario.
Yeah.
Funny
It's
place to be.
covered. London, Ontario,
Yeah.
magnificent place. Even the center of the British Empire.
What British Empire? Funny though, you should come from a place like London, isn't it?
London on the Thames. Very nice. You should come and visit us sometime.
But do you do, in your studies that you've done, how many thousands of couples have you interviewed?
I think we're into somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000.
All right, looking at the population at large, if I were to ask you to give me a breakdown on dysfunction between couples, what age groups would you choose? Would you go from, say, 22 to 60 or 30 to 50? Where are the danger areas for these people? Danger ages?
I'd pull it back further. I'd start off by looking at the 15 and 16-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
And some of our best experiences have been with really working with much older couples.
Now, bringing back to the question of children again, I mean, there you are doing your little role playing about, what's she doing with a pill? What's she doing with a pill? Well, you're never home. I got to take the responsibility for it. The pill hasn't been all that great a success, has it?
It's still our most effective method of contraception, even though it does have drawbacks, as you point out.
If you were a young woman, would you start willingly out at the age of, say, we'll say you're married young, at 18, to take the pill on a steady long-term basis and not be overly concerned about the known complications?
I would have to weigh the risks of the various methods available against
But weigh the risk.
of
Pretend
pregnancy.
for a moment, it's not that far back, that you are 18 with the knowledge you have. Weigh the risks and give me your decisions.
I was 19. Yes, at certain stages in my life, that was an important factor, not to become pregnant. And I needed absolute protection as I could have.
I thought the pill was on the way down.
I think the amount of estrogen on the pill is on the way down.
But other advances will undoubtedly come before the new dangers are found in the new methods. Would that be a cynical observation?
I think many advantages have been found from the new low-dosage pills. They're as effective as the old dosage pills, and they don't have some of the side effects.
Well, the point I was really getting to is that the pill surely led to permissiveness, leading in many instances to sexual immaturity, which when the couple finally got married, wrecked their chances. And the pill has removed from many otherwise pretty square people that discipline which is essential for a civilized society. How would you answer that little piece of Websterian philosophy? It's removed the discipline
No.
and dropped moral standards.
No.
Hey, come on, answer me.
The discipline factor has very little to do with it right now. The pill is a contraceptive, and its use in good relationships where family planning has been a problem is unchallenged. As for permissiveness, you know as well as we do that the older generation, and these are good, we've got good statistics on this. Now, the 50s and 60s were far more permissive than the kids are now. You know that the kids now are having 1 to 2 relationships a year in their 17, 18, 19 statistically, whereas before it used to be every Friday, every Saturday night on the part of the males. Now that's what I call permissiveness.
The latter.
The latter.
Well, I
Right.
can't argue with you on your statistics, but you're saying that, and of course at my age, who am I to know what to believe? You're saying that today, the average young person premarital is showing a better standard of responsibility?
Better standard of
right.
responsibility,
We're talking
more fidelity. If you know, you want to talk about discipline and fidelity, that's what they're showing. They're more, fewer relationships.
I find that a little bit hard to swallow, but perhaps that's merely the age from which I look at the particular problem, eh?
I think so.
Well, anyway, this particular book you're selling now is, it says here, and don't give me the details, please, Noam Chernick, an entirely new type of self-help sex guide, where you are given the impression you're in the Chernick's consulting room. Do these books go well? Do they sell?
Very much.
It's through its first printing.
Through its first printing already?
In Canada, that's not bad.
By the way, how is your own marriage communication? When did you last have a real row?
About,
No role playing.
About a week ago,
Sunday morning?
What was it about?
Sunday morning, I suppose, in-laws, eh?
That's right.
Difficult area.
Nasty row?
Well,
It was pretty loud.
the cuts and bruises are just healing.
Well,
now.
let's just look at this. You're with Dr. Webster now. Who
Yes.
started this? Who was to blame for this piece
She,
of...
it was her.
No,
It
no,
was
no.
her. It was.
Who made the first remark?
She did.
What did she say?
I don't remember, but it was vile.
You don't want to remember.
No.
He doesn't like your in-laws, does he? Or is it
There's
you
a
that doesn't
little
like his
problem.
in-laws?
There's a little problem there.
No, I can't make up my mind which is the dominant partner in your marriage. I suspect it really is Beryl, the wife. Am I right, Noam?
I suspect you're right.
Who writes the books?
We both write them.
Who is the senior writer in the books?
Oh, definitely, she's the senior writer.
That meant I got stuck with all the work.
You write and
He directs and I do the work, you see.
you write and he talks. Okay, role play again. I think these non-sexual role playings are a good demonstration of communication dysfunction which leads to the other. Give me another one.
Okay, I'm a guy that watches television.
You are too.
I'm watching television. There I go. I'm just watching it.
Listen,
Come on there.
honey, look, there's
Oh,
a problem
don't
from
do-
the school that we got a note about Johnny. Look, can you stop for a minute so I can
What?
talk to you about? Look, it's your kid. I'm really getting upset. What?
Oh, no.
Would you turn that off? We have to go and see the teacher
What do you-
tomorrow. Listen, it's a serious problem with your kid.
Oh,
If you'd
why
ever-
don't you get out of here? I
Well,
only
you're
got one television set and I can
It's
only watch it at a
good
time.
thing you do. You've only got one son, too, and he's going to go down the tube.
That's a good one. That may well be more realistic than even you think, right?
Most of them are.
Give me the cold marriage, the dead marriage, the no-talking marriage. Come home at night, take a drink, put your feet up and go to sleep. And the wife's sitting all there with nobody to talk to all day if she's not one of the lucky ones with a university degree or a sideline job. Give me that one. Can you do that?
I'm just telling you at work about my marriage. It's just absolutely dead. You know, nothing ever happens. Well, we had sex last week for the first time in a month and a half, but she just lies there. Just it's nothing ever happens. I heard that you had some other women, and you know, next time you go out, I'd like to be taken with you.
Now, if the wife had that remark, what would she do? Or if she suspected it, what would she do?
Well, usually you'd see her turning up in the doctor's consulting room and complaining about, well, I've had all these stomach aches, doctor. I've had these terrible stomach aches. You know, it just seems to be in a knot all the time. I really, I don't know, maybe I've got an ulcer.
Uh-huh. And tell me when you get these stomach aches.
Well, I have them most of the time lately. They used to happen just in the evenings before, but now it's there in the morning sometimes too.
So this woman is now going to require about $500 worth of provincial health money because she's going to have an x-ray of the stuff going down, an x-ray of the stuff getting up, when really what's required here is to have the two of them in the office and to find out what's going on.
Listen, that's my closing question. If you're right, and if she doesn't have an ulcer or a deep-seated neurosis, how much are we paying for lack of communications between couples and marriages in additional medical costs in this country?
A fantastic amount of money,
Millions.
I would think.
Well, maybe you are saviors. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good job.
Well, there are the Chernicks, for whatever they're worth. I thought the role-playing was quite good. Some of it quite true to life, I suspect. I'm waiting for my man Coxgrove, if he'll ever forgive me, Brian Coxford, phoning from the West Kootenay school dispute. Between now, with Brian calling to tell us the arrangements for our live broadcast, hopefully tomorrow morning for the Kootenays, free for all from now till 10:30. Webster! Just before I go to the phones, I was just trying to go through some of my mail just now. That was on videotape. I want to read you a little bit of a very touching letter which comes from an interior town from a nurse in an extended care unit. And first of all, she tells me, and I didn't know this, that when the government gave its staff allocation for extended care, it allows 2.5 hours per patient per day. Acute care is allowed 4 hours per patient per day. Then she talks about how hard they work, and I believe it. And she says, on night duty, there is one LPN and myself, 40-odd patients, one senile, goes on about that. I look in on an old man, he is near death. She's telling it in the kind of as it happens. I have laughed with him, cared for him, become his friends. This extended care unit. I have tried to make his life as happy and dignified to the time he is now facing. I want to stay with him, to hold his hand and say a prayer. He has no one to call to his bedside. We have been his family. It's a bad time. I should be turning patients with my LPN. We have to work together because of the type of patient and heavy lifting. Oh God, I want to stay with him. I tell my nurse to do what she can. I sit on his bed, we are very close. 5 minutes later he dies, and I feel at peace because he is my dear old friend and he didn't die alone. This time it worked out. We don't need, and she goes on to some details. But that's rather touching. I know that you know governments always paint a rosy picture. This is just a little from the other side. The story of a nurse who wants to spend the time. And on this occasion, she was lucky enough to be there with the old man when he died. Now, where am I going, Linda? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'd like to suggest, Jack, that with your attitudes towards drugs, that you're one of organized crime's best friends. Because the only beneficiary of our drug laws is organized crime.
Oh, I don't feel like getting into that complicated philosophical hassle this morning.
Well,
I mean, it doesn't really make an awful lot of sense, does it?
well, I guess to you it doesn't.
No.
If you can't see it, then it doesn't make sense, does it?
Can't see it. No, if I can't see it, it sure as heck doesn't make sense.
No.
But thanks for the call. I do appreciate your interest. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Jack. Yeah, I've ran a few inquiries and a few tests myself on testing stations in Vancouver, Burnaby, Richmond.
Mm-hmm.
A few of my neighbors and I, we got together, and we took our cars to the test.
Mm-hmm.
Males, we were rejected the first time.
Right.
And we asked our wives and our girlfriends to take the cars through without doing anything to them. The testing station turned around and passed the vehicle.
Hold it, hold it, hold it.
Yes.
Now,
what?
just a minute. First time you were rejected.
Yeah.
Is it not a fact that they put a rejection sticker on the windshield?
Yes.
And did you take the rejection sticker off?
Yes.
You did.
Yes. And then we let our girlfriends and our wives take the cars through.
So first of all, you went to, now which stations are you talking about?
We took it through the Burnaby testing station.
And then that's the same kind as the one they have in Vancouver, is it?
Yes.
And you go through there, and did you do this yourself?
Yes.
And you were rejected?
Yes.
Why were you rejected?
I was rejected on a few things.
Well, give me a couple of things.
Blinkers flashing too fast, blinkers not working, brake lights not working properly, seat not secured.
And are you prepared to, off the air, give me your name and whatnot, and bring a couple of people down to the studio who will testify that this happened?
Yes.
You are?
Sure.
You took it off, and then you sent your wife down.
Pardon?
You sent your wife to the same station.
Yes.
When did this happen?
Oh, well, in the past 2 years we've done this, had this happen.
Wait, just a minute.
A good friend of yours that was on the air recently was with my wife.
Now, just a minute. I've got to think this out. You go down, you get rejected. There's a sticker put saying rejected on your windshield, right?
Yes.
You take it back again with the rejection sticker off. You send your good-looking wife down, I presume.
Yes.
And it passes.
Yes.
Now, somewhere in the government system of paperwork, don't they have a note of the fact that you were previously rejected?
The only way they've got is by the card, huh? But if you just...
And okay, when did this happen?
Well, once happened this year, once happened last year.
How recently this year?
About a month and a half ago.
Will you and your wife speak to Linda and come into the studio to tell me about it and give me the license number?
Well, okay, I guess so.
Linda, will you take number, whatever it is, and get it? Okay, Linda, thanks very much. That sounds quite intriguing, if true, if true.
It's true.
How many other of your friends have done the same thing?
Just one.
Okay, one on ones, two. Speak to Linda, get the number, thank you. Quinnell, Trail, good morning. Good morning from Trail. I've got it open. Oh, it's the wrong one. Where am I? Keep blinking the lights on me.
I'm here, Mr. Webster.
Go on. Go ahead from Trail.
Okay, Mr. Webster?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's Heather Street in Salmo calling with
Oh.
the Citizen Association for the Rights of Education.
Right. You were talking to me yesterday.
Yes, I certainly was.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I've got my points listed here. Shall I go ahead with them?
Go ahead with your points. Now,
Okay, first off, as parents, we have mixed feelings out here. There's an awful lot of anger, hurt, and resentment. We're very poorly informed, and frankly, we don't know who to believe. And the next thing is that we're wondering what can be done about this binding arbitration. It's ridiculous. The teachers have it, but then QP and the school board can turn around and shut the school down right away. Another thing we're wondering about is Dr. McGear's statement that he says that this will be looked into within 2 weeks. This simply isn't good enough. When we figured it out, our children now have missed 7 weeks of school. from January the 1st through to the end of June, there are approximately 22 school weeks left. Now, there is no way that they'll ever catch up those 7 weeks. Also, the Selkirk Student Executive has learned that if this labor dispute persists beyond Christmas, the second semester of their university transfer courses will be canceled.
Oh, be down the drain.
Yeah, so in effect, what happens is that they're going to lose their complete academic year. So, like I say, as you can see that this statement from Dr. McGeer, it's good, there's hope in it, but it just isn't immediate enough.
That's a very good point. The Selkirk College students, if this goes on Christmas, will lose their second half of their academic year and they won't be qualified or eligible to go to university.
Right.
That's a bad one. Well, now Brian Coxford, my reporter, is up in Trail at this moment. We'll be in Nelson later. And he's covering it for the news hour at 6 o'clock tonight. And then tomorrow morning, we have plans to transmit his material live from Nelson, from telephone company in Nelson tomorrow morning. So we'll be giving live coverage to all those who are involved in it, hopefully. How far are you from Nelson?
Only 26 miles. We have talked to your crew that are out here.
You've spoken
They did
about...
arrive here this morning, as you know, and they are very, very helpful and very easy to get along with. So we appreciate
Don't
the
be
coverage.
too helpful to them.
Well, I've got you. Could I maybe make another point?
Sure.
We feel up here, too, Mr. Webster, that we're being discriminated against in the West Kootenays, and that the students are at a severe disadvantage. Now, what I'd like to get across to you is that does the party in power not get support? Now, as you probably know, we are just an NDP riding, and I think they've just let us sit and stew up here.
Oh, I can give you an unqualified no to that one. I don't think that matters a dash. When it comes to building roads, bridges, and highways, that's something else again.
Right,
But
okay.
on a school issue, no.
Also, we seem
no.
to have a personal conflict between Mr. Stewart and Mr. Pike. Both parties have expressed displeasure and lack of confidence. They've even gone so far as to put an ad in the Nelson Daily News stating, and the ad reads, "To the school board, Nelson, get your facts straight. We local 748 QP have said publicly we will meet you at any time, anywhere other than school property. Leave Pike at home, leave Stewart at home, and we challenge you to come out from under your propaganda shield and settle this with an adequate wage."
Who put that ad in?
Beg your pardon?
Who put that ad in?
Yeah, I've got the ad in.
No, who put the ad in?
The school board did.
The school board
The
did.
chairman of the strike committee is actually where the ad came, and
did it say, did I get you right, it said leave Pike and Stewart at home?
Right. That's what the ad...
Okay, anyway, we're doing our best to give you coverage. We're doing our best to make sure that those in Victoria and those down here and all throughout the province, because the East Kootenays got the back-of-the-hand treatment last year too, and give us credit for getting McGeer to revive the whole dispute and create some interest in it on the essential services possibility.
Right.
So watch
and
for
thanks ever so much for all that
Watch for
you've done.
Brian. Brian.
Okay.
Brian
Thank you, Mr.
Coxford
Webster.
will.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Brian will be live in the morning. Be on the news hour tonight and live in the morning from Nelson tomorrow. More calls. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Webster, I was listening with interest to your interview with the Chernicks. When I was 18 myself, I went on the pill for medical reasons, and although the temptation was very great, I never allowed myself the enjoyment of a sexual relationship until the wedding band was on my hand. And I'm sure, although at the time I felt I was the only one, that there must be hundreds, if not thousands, of people in the same situation that I was.
I hope that you and the likes of you couldn't hold a convention in a telephone booth.
Pardon?
I hope that you couldn't hold a convention in a telephone booth.
In any event, I think that where there are parents who communicate together, then these kind of problems wouldn't arise in the first place.
That was what was good about the Chernicks this morning.
Yes, I thought they were very good. I've often wondered about these kind of people.
Their play acting was very good and very true to life.
Well, sure it was. I think if the parents are communicating, then if they bring their children up in a proper set of moral values, then they don't have to concern themselves with their children's behavior.
Thank you, ma'am, and congratulations. Go ahead, please. Hello there.
Hello, Jack.
Oh, Brian.
Hi, how are you doing?
You'll never forgive me. I talked about you on the air this morning as Brian Coxgrove.
Well, there must be somebody in the phone book with that name.
Anyway, Brian, what's the score this morning?
Well, we were up fairly early, and what happened is over this week, starting Monday, the pickets have hit the junior secondary and secondary schools on a hit-and-miss basis. The first 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, they hit Trail. Today, they decided to go to Rossland. And school was supposed to start there at 8 o'clock, and the pickets arrived in plenty of time prior to that. And when the students arrived, it was sort of a situation, a standoff on either side, both of them carrying placards, students wanting to get into class, and of course the CUPE workers claiming to be locked out. Their situation, as far as they're concerned, is get the trustees to lift the lockout. Students could go back to school immediately.
Yeah, but what I want to get clear is the fact that without the CUPE pickets on these hit-and-miss bases, the kids would have gone into the unheated classrooms with the teachers for some tuition.
Most definitely.
Okay, where'll you be tonight?
Tonight we'll be moving to Nelson.
Uh-huh.
We should be staying at the People's Motor Inn there.
The People's...
And, of course, tomorrow is the big day as far as the parents are concerned. There's 3 demonstrations planned here, one in Nelson, that moves on to Castlegar, then another one in the afternoon in Trail. And it's really starting to warm up here. Everybody involved, with the exception of the union, wants the government to take action, not next week or
now.
the week after, but right now with essential services.
In other words, what McGeer said on this, what we got McGeer to say on this program the other day has rekindled the whole battle, you might say, to get some instant action.
It sure has. The only difference there is they want action now, not in 2 weeks, because the difference there would, if they move in 2 weeks, you're into the Christmas holidays, and add another couple of weeks on there, so you're looking at a total of about 7 weeks before you get any kind of action at all.
So you'll be at the People's Motors Inn tonight and tomorrow morning for any leaders of delegations or any groups that want to tell you what they're up to.
That's correct.
You could be mobbed.
Yes.
Anyway, if the microwave links go all right, we shall have you. Tonight you're on after the hockey game.
Yes, we'll be on the news hour tonight.
After the hockey game.
The story from Rossland, and also right at the present time, there's various delegations meeting and planning strategy
Brian,
for tomorrow, etc. And
I gotta go tonight after the hockey game. Tomorrow morning live on Webster from Nelson.
For sure.
Thanks, Brian. Much obliged. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hold on. Cam wants to talk to you. Hold on. Go ahead, please.
Oh, Jack Webster?
Yes.
I'd like to talk to you about this antitrust act when you had Mr. Warren Allmand on the TV this morning.
Yeah.
Has he or have you ever read the Anti-Combines Act?
Yes.
Do you think you could tell the people exactly what that is?
I'd have to do a special program on it. Basically speaking, I remember it well in the Pacific Press case in 1954 or 55.
Yes, and a friend of yours is Mr. Reynolds, you know?
Who's he?
Well, he's the MP that's going to...
don't know him. Haven't spoken to him in years. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hi, Jack.
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Yes. Can you get it over to the union leaders and the working men? Ponder one point. Why are there no strikes in Russia?
No strikes in Russia because there is a dictatorship, and as long as we have a democracy and reasonable freedom, we will have strikes. Go ahead, please.
Jack?
Yes.
A little prejudiced because I dislike the Chernicks intensely. And I think, I have a feeling that they just jumped on the permissive sex bandwagon to make a buck like all the rest of them. In spite of what they said about permissiveness, I think that you missed the boat here, that you didn't quote some statistics on the illegitimate births and abortions among teenagers, you know. And I couldn't quote them to you myself, but anything I've read on them, they're astronomical, you know, increase. As far as their play acting this morning, I thought that was okay, because everybody has similar problems like that. But it's certainly nothing like the film they had shown in the schools during the sex hassle.
Well, I wasn't going to get into that hassle,
No,
man.
I wouldn't want to do it myself either. It was very distasteful.
Anyway, it wasn't a bad interview.
No, it was very good.
Can't be perfect all the time. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack.
That's me.
Well, you can open yourself a real can of worms when you start talking about the motor vehicle testing and discrepancies that exist in the various inspectors, and even the discrepancies that exist between the various, like the Burnaby branch and the Vancouver branch. I know I've had the same problem. I've had my tires rejected and taken all my tires off and put them on my father's truck, and then gone through with his tires, and then he's decided to take his truck to the test without me knowing, and gone through with my tires on his truck being passed.
Well, that's just a question of, I suppose, the standard set by the individual inspector.
Well, I think so, and I think it's extremely difficult to come up with any kind of standardization because you're dealing with personalities. And
anyway, who knows? Who knows what the future holds? Who knows what the sleuths around here might do? But the very fact that it's been on the air may change things.
Well, I would like to see it because I know I've been rejected on things that inspectors say, holy smokes, just come back through and go through again, especially when you're dealing with diesel engines and the amount of smoke that's coming from them.
That's difficult. We don't want to get into that hassle. Anyway, thanks for your call.
Anyway,
Time
thank
for
you.
what? Eh? I missed him. Very short call. Yes.
Hello, Jack.
Yes.
I was sorry I couldn't get on when McGear was on. But talking about teachers and arbitration,
Okay, you've got 15 seconds.
they've been doing very well under arbitration, and they used to complain about it, but they don't anymore.
Don't forget, when they get their 7.5%, they always get their 3% increment. Always add 3%.
Okay, I know all that, Jack.
But I got to go. My time is up. I think. Take a break. Little policy statement. I get dozens of invitations to go out to speak. I just turned down one right now. With this new program, this new weight, and trying to make it easier, I just can't take speaking dates. Linda, tomorrow.
We have Brian live from Nelson reporting on the CUPE situation.
Well, that's Brian Coxford.
Coxford, yes.
Pierre Burton?
No.
We used him.
We used him yesterday, remember?
Oh, so we did. He's out the way, good old Pierre. So that's West Kootenay School Strike tomorrow morning, and who knows what else. On Webster at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning precisely.